Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep. Welcome to episode 93 of International Relations This week. Under this series, every Wednesday at 8 p.m., we have been covering important geopolitical developments that have implications for India's national interests. This discussion is strictly from the perspective of UPSC Civil Services examination. So if you have been benefiting from the initiative, do let us know by liking the video, share your comments below once the stream ends, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. So let's begin today's discussion, and first we shall take a look at the topics that we are going to cover today. We'll begin with Israel. We'll take a look at the recent political developments in Israel. Recently, elections have been concluded in Israel, and Benjamin Netanyahu has won a historic mandate and is all set to return as the Prime Minister of Israel. So we shall talk about the internal political issues of Israel, how it affects the geopolitics of West Asia, and we shall also discuss the implications of this development for India. We shall be taking a look at India-Israel relations as well. Next, we'll take a look at our neighborhood. We'll look at Afghanistan, and we'll talk about the drug menace in Afghanistan. Because recently the UNODC has brought out a report on drug production in Afghanistan and how it fuels terrorism in Afghanistan. So obviously this has very important implications for India. So we shall take a detailed look at this topic. Then we'll look at Pakistan as well, where former Prime Minister Imran Khan was recently attacked. There was an assassination attempt against Imran Khan. This exposes the fault lines, the political fault lines in Pakistan, and gives us an opportunity to take a look at the complex politics involving the Pakistani army and Pakistan's civilian government and the political parties. These developments in Pakistan, of course, affects India's interests. India is closely watching these developments, so we shall have a discussion on this important development. Next, we'll move to North Korea, where North Korea has fired a barrage of missiles aimed towards South Korea and Japan. North Korea has been known to conduct these aggressive missile tests. This has increased tensions between North Korea and South Korea, and also between North Korea and the United States. So we shall talk about this in detail, and we shall move to Africa to take a look at the Tigray conflict in Ethiopia. Recently, a peace agreement has been signed between the Ethiopian government and the TPLF, which is a rebel group. So we shall understand the importance of this development for Africa. We shall also talk about India's ties with Ethiopia and India's interests in the Horn of Africa region. So these are the important topics which are lined up for today's discussion. Let's start with the first topic, that is Israel. Last week, Israel's elections have been concluded, and Benjamin Netanyahu has won a stunning mandate, and his right-wing coalition, led by his party, the Likud party, is all set to form the next government of Israel. So Netanyahu will return as the Prime Minister of Israel after defeating his center-left opponent, Yair Lapid, who was the incumbent Prime Minister. So this development in Israel has very serious implications for Israel's politics, for the Israel-Palestine conflict, and also for the wider geopolitics of the West Asia region. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has welcomed this development. He has congratulated Benjamin Netanyahu on his electoral victory. And Prime Minister Modi has expressed hope that with Netanyahu as the leader, India-Israel relations will become stronger, and India is looking to further deepen the strategic partnership with Israel. See, Benjamin Netanyahu has been the longest serving leader of Israel. He has won a record 5 elections and will be holding the office of Prime Minister for the 6th time. This in itself is a record, an unprecedented record in Israel. No other Prime Minister has served Israel for such a long time. Netanyahu, though a very widely popular leader in Israel, is equally controversial and divisive in Israel's politics. Netanyahu comes from a right-wing party, the Likud party, and his political inclinations and ideology is seen to be more aligned with the far right-wing ideology, which is a more conservative ideology aligned with religious orthodoxy and religious extremism. Netanyahu has built his political base over the last 20-odd years mainly by taking an aggressive stand on the Palestinian issue. He has built a strong man image, someone who can take strong and controversial decisions. And he's known for his aggressive position with regard to the Israel-Palestine conflict. Under Netanyahu, Israel has taken a number of aggressive steps in Jerusalem, in West Bank, also in Gaza Strip, targeting the Palestinian movement and as well as extremist groups like Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Netanyahu had even encouraged Jewish settlements, illegal Jewish settlements in the conflict-hit Palestinian territories. Netanyahu also has taken a very aggressive position against Iran, which is a regional rival for Israel. Iran and Israel have shared a lot of rivalry between each other. They engage in not just overt display of aggression towards each other, but they also engage in covert wars against each other. In this regard, Netanyahu has taken a very aggressive position against Iran, targeting Iran's nuclear weapons program. So this has brought Netanyahu a lot of popularity within Israel, especially amongst the more orthodox, conservative section of the Israeli society. However, the liberals in Israel, they view Netanyahu as a divisive figure, someone who promotes radical ideologies, someone who's aligned with religious orthodox views, someone who's promoting authoritarian tendencies and extremist views that could further increase violence between the Israelis and the Arabs. This could end up further destabilizing West Asia, and many liberals in Israel, many analysts, they see that Netanyahu's return and his growing alignment with far right-wing forces could push Israel into an authoritarian religious state that could increase the communal tensions and threaten democracy itself in Israel. So in short, Netanyahu is both a popular figure and a controversial figure. So irrespective of Israel's internal political issues which have erupted in the last few years, India-Israel relations have thrived. Especially in the last 2-3 years, in Israel's politics, there has been a lot of political churn. Many governments have fallen repeatedly, new leaders have come and gone, repeated elections have taken place. So within Israel, there has been a degree of political instability, which is a direct outcome of the ideological divide between the right, center and the left in Israel's politics. But this internal political crisis hasn't had much of an impact on India-Israel relations. Because as most of you know, India-Israel share a strategic partnership. Both are very close partners to each other. Since 1968, India-Israel have had very, very close relations. Even though formal diplomatic ties, official diplomatic ties were established only in 1992, much before that, India-Israel had set up a covert relationship. The then Indira Gandhi government had opened a covert relationship with Israel, and the intelligence agencies of both the countries, that is RAW and Mossad, had set up a security-based relationship where both countries were exchanging intelligence, providing military support to each other. So India-Israel, they do share a very strong defense security relationship. In 1992, after the Cold War ended, India went ahead and established formal diplomatic ties with Israel, and this year, that is 2022, marks the 30th anniversary of India-Israel diplomatic relations. That's one more reason why the topic is important. So ever since India established formal ties with Israel, the relations have boomed between the two countries, and especially from 2014, after Prime Minister Modi came to power, and after Prime Minister Modi started working closely with Netanyahu, India-Israel relations have reached new heights in the last 8 years. So irrespective of the internal political changes that have happened in the last 2-3 years, India-Israel relations have flourished. It has remained largely unaffected by the internal crisis of Israel. Now see, in the last 3 decades, India-Israel have built a very important strategic partnership. Israel has become a top defense supplier to India. In fact, after Russia, Israel happens to be the second largest defense supplier of military hardware to India. India has procured a lot of key weapon platforms, including the Barak surface-to-air missile systems, the Falcon AWACS or the airborne early warning command systems. Most of the drones operated by Indian forces like the Searcher and Heron drones. even they have been procured from Israel. So there is a very strong defense partnership between the two countries. Both countries are also working on a number of joint defense projects as well. Apart from this, India and Israel share very close relations with regard to intelligence sharing and counterterrorism. The intelligence agencies of India and Israel collaborate very closely. Both the sides, they share intelligence with each other. They cooperate in the field of counterterrorism as they perceive common threats. They see common threats as a result of terrorism, which affects both the countries. They closely watch Pakistan's nuclear program, which is seen as a threat for both India and Israel. And they also maintain a close watch on Pakistan's role in enabling terrorism in the region, as eventually these Pakistan-backed terror outfits also have links with other radical extremist groups that target Israel as well. So in the field of counterterrorism, intelligence sharing, India and Israel are very close to each other. Even in the field of cybersecurity, Israel is a leader and India and Israel collaborate very closely in the field of cybersecurity as well. These ties are not just limited to military, defense and intelligence cooperation, but India and Israel have a stronger relationship with regard to scientific and technical cooperation as well. In the field of space cooperation, in the field of agriculture, healthcare, desalination, water management, in all these areas, India and Israel are working very closely with each other. Of late, they are prioritizing economic relations as well, and both the countries have played a key role in establishing an important initiative called the I2U2, which is also being referred to as the West Asian Quad. Recently, India, Israel, the United Arab Emirates and USA, these four countries have come together to form an economic partnership called the I2U2, which will drive investments from UAE, US and Israel into India. And Israel is already looking to not just provide investments to India, but also to share technology with India in key sectors like food processing, renewable energy, etc. So as you can see, India and Israel have a broad-based relationship. It's a strategic partnership built on many key pillars. But the driving factor of this relationship is the close defense and intelligence relations between the two countries. So irrespective of the government in power, either in India or Israel, irrespective of the party which is in power in India and Israel, the two countries have shared very close relations in the last 3 decades. However, the return of Netanyahu to power does pose challenges for Israel itself, for West Asian geopolitics, and also creates difficult choices for India. See, India, even though it has built very close ties with Israel, we continue to support the two-state solution that was proposed by the United Nations in 1947 to create two separate countries for the Jews and the Palestinians, that is Israel and Palestine. In 1947, while dealing with the Israel-Palestine issue, the UN had proposed the two-state solution. The idea was to create a separate Jewish state for the Israelis and a separate Arab Muslim state for the Palestinians. But Israel broke the two-state solution, it broke the international commitments and unilaterally declared independence in 1948. So thus it breached the two-state solution and Israel strongly established itself as a military power and denied Palestine the opportunity to establish itself as a sovereign independent country. That's one prime reason why India hadn't recognized Israel initially. Even after we gave Israel recognition in 1950, till 1992, India wouldn't establish diplomatic ties with Israel, not just because of Israel's violation of the two-state solution, but also because India was worried about affecting its ties with West Asian countries. Key West Asian powers, including Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq and others, they were all backing Palestine. They even went to war with Israel over the Palestine issue. They fought two major conflicts, the Arab states together fought two major wars against Israel in 1948 and in 1960s. Since India has been heavily dependent on West Asian countries for its energy security, India wouldn't establish official ties with Israel out of the fear of angering the West Asian countries which were key oil suppliers to India. But post-92, the situation changed and India got an opportunity to get closer to Israel officially. even though covert secret relations had been established from 1968 itself. India would go ahead and establish formal ties in 92, and in the last 3 decades, we have learned to balance our ties between Israel and the West Asian powers. But throughout this period, we have firmly remained committed to the two-state solution, and even today, India continues backing the right of Palestinians to have their own independent country. On the other hand, Israel has often been accused of committing human rights violations against Palestinians. It has been accused of using excessive force, disproportionate force against Palestinians. So quite often, Israel was targeted at the UN Human Rights Council. And before 2014, India was voting against Israel, even though Israel was a key strategic partner. But from 2014 onwards, that is under the Modi government, India has started abstaining from these votes. We no longer vote against Israel at the UNHRC. Instead, India abstains from the vote. So India has clearly balanced out its relationship. We have continued the strong relations with Israel, stopped voting against Israel. At the same time, we still continue backing the two-state solution by keeping in mind the rights of Palestinians, the right of Palestinians to have their own independent country. So this delicate balance that India has struck between Israel, Palestine, and the West Asian countries could be disturbed because of Netanyahu's aggressive policies. This is a challenge that India is going to face. Netanyahu and his right-wing party, the Likud party, has aligned with many ultra-Orthodox Jewish parties and religious, conservative, and extremist groups as well. Increasingly, Netanyahu has aligned with radical Zionist forces and has been taking support from ultra-conservative religious groups and extremist organizations. These groups have been promoting very aggressive policies against Palestinian Arabs. They are proposing laws that will discriminate against Palestinian Arabs who are Jewish citizens or Israeli citizens. Policies have been proposed to demolish important pilgrimage sites in Jerusalem and to turn them into Jewish pilgrimage sites. So communal divisions are being promoted by these extremist outfits, and Netanyahu and his party seem to be aligning with these extremist forces. Netanyahu has made it clear that there is no place for two-state solution anymore. There is no place for Palestine being set up as an independent nation. So this will create complexities for India while dealing with Israel and Palestine. Because even though we have built close ties with Israel, we have stopped voting against Israel as well. Parallelly, we have been supporting the two-state solution as an ideological commitment towards the Palestinians. So this stand of Netanyahu and his alignment with radical forces could also increase violence. It could increase communal tensions between the Jews and the Palestinian Arabs. This could trigger another wave of violence, another wave of intifada led by Palestinian extremists targeted against the Israeli state. It could further destabilize West Asia itself, thus complicating India's diplomatic choices in West Asian geopolitics. And also the fear is that the normalization of relations which was underway between Israel and Arab countries through the Abraham Accords could also get affected because of Netanyahu's aggressive policies. Recently, the United States under Donald Trump had mediated the Abraham Accords in 2020, which led to normalization of ties between Israel and UAE, Israel and Bahrain, and also between Israel and Morocco and Sudan. These important Arab states and Muslim nations across West Asia and North Africa, they had normalized their ties with Israel following the Abraham Accords, and they had established official ties with Israel. This was bringing more stability to the volatile West Asia region. So if Israel moves more towards extremist policies against Palestinians, if it gets more aggressive against Iran, it will destabilize the region further, and any further increase of divisions, communal divisions between the Jews and the Arabs could also affect the normalization process that could affect the ties between Israel and the Arab states. So this places India in a very complex situation because India will have to choose again between Israel, West Asian countries and the Palestinian issue. So it's in this context that the development is relevant for India's foreign policy. So now let's move to the second topic. UNODC, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, brought out a report last week on drug production in Afghanistan. I hope you know that Afghanistan is a major drug producing nation. Majority of the world's opiates are produced in Afghanistan. It's a major opium producing country, and the drugs which are produced in Afghanistan are directly linked with money laundering, organized crime, and it is also seen as a funding route for terrorism and extremist radical activities in Afghanistan. It's in this context that the UNODC report becomes very important. According to this report submitted by the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, the land area under poppy cultivation, basically opium cultivation, has increased by 32% over the last 1 year. That is after Taliban took over Afghanistan in September 2021. Since then, the land area under which poppy or opium is being cultivated has seen a major increase of 32%, especially during the sowing season in October and September. There has been a major increase that has been noted in poppy cultivation in Afghanistan. So this is an alarming report because, as I explained, Afghan drugs are closely linked with terrorism and radicalism. So we need to understand a little more about this and how it affects India. India closely watches the links between the drug trafficking cartels of Afghanistan and Pakistan and their links with terror outfits and hostile criminal groups and hostile terror outfits and intelligence agencies which pose a threat to Indian security interests. See, Afghanistan has always been a fertile ground for opium cultivation. Farmers, various warlords, ethnic Pashtun warlords, they've all relied on poppy cultivation as an easy source of revenue. These opiates are smuggled and trafficked out of the region, and they find a huge market, especially in Western countries, in US, in European countries, and also in other parts of the world, in Africa, in India, in Southeast Asia, etc. So the production of drugs in Afghanistan is mainly carried out by local farmers, especially in the Pashtun belt of southern and western and eastern Afghanistan. Many of these opium fields are controlled by ethnic Pashtun warlords, and most of them are aligned with the Taliban. In fact, when Taliban came to power for the first time in 1996, when it had toppled the then government during the Afghan civil war in 1990s, and when Taliban had captured power, initially Taliban had placed a ban on opium cultivation because this was in line with Taliban's commitments towards the Sharia law. With regard to implementing the Sharia law, Taliban had prohibited the production and cultivation of opium or poppy cultivation in Afghanistan. But this ban, many experts see that this ban is an artificial ban imposed by the Taliban. The ban results in a sudden increase of prices because poppy cultivation becomes illegal. The market gets pushed underground and the prices will see a very big increase. And during this period between 1996 and 2001, Taliban was imposing a tax on the producers and traffickers, which was fetching revenue to the Taliban. Because in the 90s, that is between 96 and 2001, when Taliban had taken control and formed the then government, Taliban was deprived of revenue. Most countries hadn't recognized the Taliban government. It was economically isolated. So Taliban saw that drug production is a great source of revenue. So just to create an image that it is enforced in the Sharia law, it banned the production of opium, but this was an artificial ban which wouldn't be enforced on the ground. The prices would shoot up as a result of the ban, and then Taliban would tax this. The traffickers, the traders, the smugglers, the farmers, they would all supposed to be pay a tax to the Taliban, thus increasing revenue for the Taliban. Taliban would earn millions of dollars in revenue, which would further be used for funding radical and extremist activities in Afghanistan. So in this entire nexus, organized criminal cartels like the Dawood Ibrahim gang or the D gang, even Pakistan's intelligence agency, the ISI, would be involved, because it was a lucrative source of revenue for funding radical extremist activities. In fact, there has been a direct link between Afghan drugs and the Khalistan movement in Punjab, which was raging in the 1980s. Pakistan's ISI would play a direct role in pumping Afghan drugs into Punjab to further fuel the Khalistan terrorism against India. So India has always been deeply concerned about the links between drug production in Afghanistan and the way in which the money flows into the hands of the ISI and other terror outfits, many of which would target India as well. Today, 80% of global opiate production happens in Afghanistan. 80% of the global supplies of opiate-based drugs is coming from Afghanistan. There are also reports from UNODC that even synthetic chemical drugs like meth are being produced in Afghanistan today. So the concern for India and other countries is that in the last 1 year, after Taliban has taken over power again in the country, there has been a 32% increase in the land area under which poppy or opium is being cultivated. The harvest or the final output has gone down in the last 1 year because there has been a drought in Afghanistan. There has been a drought because of which the overall production has gone down, but the land area under which opium is being cultivated has seen a 32% increase. After Taliban took over power again last year, that is in 2021, Taliban again banned the production of drugs. Formally, Taliban has again placed a ban as per the Sharia law, but the question is, will Taliban really enforce the ban? As expected, after the ban, the prices of drugs has shot up in the black market. That is exactly what Taliban wants, because now Taliban can place these taxes on farmers and traffickers and producers, through which it can make a lot of money. It can fetch millions of dollars in revenue to the Taliban. So this is the biggest concern for the United Nations, for countries like India and others, which are trying to tackle the threats posed by drug trafficking, organized crime, and its links with terrorism and radicalism. Just take a look at this graph. This graph provides a clear illustration of how drug production has increased in Afghanistan over the years. Through the early 90s and mid 90s, poppy cultivation saw an increase, especially here in 96, when Taliban took control of the country. Then here in 2001, you see a sudden dip in drug cultivation and production after the 9/11 attacks. Because following the 9/11 attacks, which was carried out by the Al-Qaeda that was sheltered by the Taliban, the US carried out an invasion of the country through an international coalition force. So as Taliban was thrown out of power and as the country descended into war, drug production hit an all-time low. But after that, drug cultivation revived itself and sustained all the way from 2001 to 2021. Even when foreign troops were present in Afghanistan, even when US was putting pressure on Taliban and other terror outfits, parallelly drug cultivation, drug production kept increasing, reaching record levels in Afghanistan. Because the primary focus of US, its armed forces and intelligence agencies, was on countering Taliban and Al-Qaeda. They didn't focus much on the drug trafficking, which was a major source of funding for extremist radical activities. Now, after Taliban took over, you see a small dip in the overall production. This is because of the drought which has hit the country. But the land area which is under cultivation has increased, as pointed out by the UN report. There has been a 32% increase in the land area. So in the coming months, in the coming years, you will see a surge in Afghan drug production. The drugs produced here, they are trafficked not just in the region, but they are trafficked around the world. Many criminal cartels based out of Pakistan, like the Dawood Ibrahim gang, even Pakistan's state agencies like the ISI, enable the trafficking of these drugs through various routes, including the northern route, where the drugs are trafficked into Central Asia. They are pushed into Europe as well. They are pushed into the Indian Ocean through various smuggling and trafficking routes with the help of Pakistani state agencies. And this poses a very serious threat to India. A lot of these drugs also land in India. They are pushed across the border from Punjab and Jammu and Kashmir. From Indian Ocean, the drugs are taken through the southern route to East Africa and other parts of Africa and even to North America as well, as US is one of the biggest markets for these drugs. So US, Europe, India, even Southeast Asia, they are all affected by the drugs which are produced and trafficked from the Afghanistan-Pakistan region. This has very serious security implications because, as I explained, drug trafficking is very closely linked with terror financing and money laundering. The challenge for India is that we find ourselves in a very difficult geography. We are sandwiched between two major hubs of drug production and drug trafficking. One is the Golden Crescent region, which you can see here in the map. This is the Golden Crescent region covering Afghanistan, Pakistan, and parts of Iran. It's one of the top drug producing centers of the world, and India shares a direct boundary with the Golden Crescent region. To the east as well, we are bound by the Golden Triangle that covers parts of Myanmar, Thailand, and Laos. And from here as well, there is a large-scale influx of drugs into India's northeast. Here as well, drug trafficking is linked with insurgency, extremist activities, which affects the northeast of India. So that is the reason why the latest report by UNODC is of relevance for India. India closely watches these developments. It is trying to tackle the threat of drug trafficking because this poses a very big national security risk for India. Since Pakistan enables drug trafficking from Afghanistan, it looks to pump the drugs into India. And since the money coming from drug trafficking funds terror activities against India, these developments are of great concern for India. It's in that context the development becomes very, very important. So here I would like to give you a small exercise. I want you guys to read more about UNODC. Identify 5 important points about ONDC, 5 important facts about ONDC, and post them in the comments below. Take it as an assignment because UNODC can become a very important topic for your prelims. There can be a prelims question on the UN Office on Drugs and Crime. So take this as a small exercise, read about UNODC, identify 5 important factual points and post them in the comment section below. Now moving on to the third topic, we shall take a look at the recent developments in Pakistan. Last week, Pakistan's former Prime Minister Imran Khan came under an assassination attempt. An individual was carrying a gun, opened fire against Imran Khan during a political rally, and Imran Khan was injured. He took few bullets on his leg, but he didn't suffer any serious life-threatening injuries, and he is already on his way to recovery. But this incident, it opens up the political divide, the political fault lines in Pakistan, and it is of great concern to India. So let's elaborate on this topic and understand why this is relevant for us. See, Imran Khan is the leader of a party called the PTI, Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. His party was in power until recently. Imran Khan was the Prime Minister of the country as well. But earlier this year, there was a no confidence motion which was moved against him, following which he was removed from power. So now there is a new government headed by the Pakistan Muslim League that's led by Nawaz Sharif, the former Prime Minister of Pakistan, and now his brother, Shehbaz Sharif, has become the Prime Minister of the country. So ever since Imran Khan was removed as the Prime Minister of Pakistan, he has been leading a long march. He has been leading a long protest where he is trying to mobilize people in his support, and he is trying to push the country towards fresh elections. He had alleged that he was removed from power due to a conspiracy involving the Pakistani army, the United States, and the political opposition. This was the allegation made by Imran Khan when he was removed as the PM through the no confidence motion. He has alleged that the Pakistani army is meddling in Pakistan's politics. Pakistan's opposition has aligned with the Pakistani army and aligned with the US as well, and he has said that this is a grand conspiracy to remove him and his party from power. So now he has been leading a protest for many months. He has been leading a long march, Because in Pakistan, there is a history of political leaders carrying out these long protests and long marches. And Imran Khan is trying to inspire a political movement which could potentially bring him back to power. Now, this is where you need to understand the complex political history of Pakistan. In fact, there is a ironic joke related to Pakistan's politics. Many experts say that in Pakistan, prime ministers are removed due to two reasons. One, they are either assassinated or they are forcefully removed through a military coup, basically where the military captures power from a civilian government. This is quite true as well, because throughout Pakistan's history, independent history, there have been multiple military coup attempts where the military has successfully captured power, or Pakistan's army has always played a direct determining role in influencing Pakistan's politics, in toppling governments, installing new leaders, and several top Pakistani leaders, including prime ministers, presidents, have been assassinated as well in the past. There have been allegations that Pakistan's deep state, that includes the Pakistani army and its intelligence agency, the ISI, they conspire together to retain complete control over political power in the country, and when they come across problematic leaders, allegedly they even get them assassinated. Now, if you take a look at Pakistan's history right from independence, right from 1951, there have been several such incidents. For example, the first Prime Minister of Pakistan, Liaquat Ali Khan, he was shot dead at a political rally. In 1958, Pakistan saw its first military coup, where then Pakistani Army General Ayub Khan, throughout the civilian government, introduced martial law and became the self-appointed leader, became a dictator, military dictator in Pakistan. Then after the liberation of Bangladesh, after Pakistan was split into two, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto was elected as the Prime Minister. He led his party, the Pakistan People's Party, to power, and he took over power from General Yahya Khan. But after this transition, we saw that Zia-ul Haq seized power through again a military coup, and Zulfikar Ali Bhutto was thrown out. He was placed under house arrest as well, and martial law was brought back. So Pakistan again came under a military dictatorship. Then later, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto was even hanged. He was hanged following a conviction in a criminal case by Zia-ul Haq, the military dictator. Then Zia-ul Haq himself in 1980s would die under mysterious circumstances when his aircraft crashed. There have been a lot of conspiracy theories surrounding his death, a lot of allegations that this was an assassination attempt. In 1999, when India-Pakistan tensions were at the highest point following nuclear tests, when India-Pakistan were about to head towards the Kargil war, then Pakistani Army Chief Pervez Musharraf seized power by throwing out Nawaz Sharif from power. Then in 2007, two-time Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto, the leader of Pakistan People's Party, was assassinated during a political rally when she was leading a similar long march pushing for reforms, political reforms. The allegation was that the deep state of Pakistan, the army and the ISI, had got her assassinated as she was gaining more popularity. So Pakistan has this history of political turmoil, and the latest incident involving an assassination attempt against Imran Khan reflects the deepening fault lines in Pakistan. It reflects the power struggle between the deep state that involves the army and the ISI, the elected civilian government, and the three major political parties, that is the Pakistan Muslim League, Pakistan People's Party, and Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. There has always been a political struggle, a power struggle between these three stakeholders. It's a well-known reality that there exists a dual control in Pakistan. You have an elected civilian government, which is often seen as a puppet at the hands of the deep state of Pakistan. Many experts, even former Indian diplomats, they often point out how the Pakistani army and ISI have directly interfered in politics, and without their support, no leader or no party can come to power and survive in power. Anyone who is seen as problematic to the deep state often gets removed either through a coup or through a political crisis or sometimes through an assassination. So in the case of the recent crisis, Imran Khan has again alleged that the assassination attempt was a planned attempt by the Pakistani army along with the current government led by Shehbaz Sharif. Imran Khan has consistently taken a stand against the army and even alleged American involvement in the latest political crisis. But the reality is that all the major politicians, major political parties, they do rely on support from the Pakistani army. The reason why the deep state controls Pakistan's politics and interferes directly in democratic politics is because the army and the ISI will thrive as long as Pakistan remains a militarized state. This militaristic approach of Pakistan is what keeps the army and the ISI relevant as they keep projecting India as their imminent threat. The army and the ISI remain powerful, retain all resources to themselves. All the funds that Pakistan receives, all resources of Pakistan, including its nuclear weapons, remain firmly under the control of the deep state, which allows the Pakistani army and the ISI to take an aggressive stand against India, to continue their covert proxy war against India, and constantly project India as an imminent threat for the very survival and existence of Pakistan. By constantly projecting India as a threat, the army and the ISI retain their power, their influence, meddle with civilian politics, electoral politics, and still the deep state does not face a major challenge from the people at large, because Pakistan manages to convince that the militarization of Pakistan is essential to protect against India. So obviously this has very serious implications for India, because India knows very well that the covert war of Pakistan is sponsored by the Pakistani army and the ISI. While India is forced to engage with the civilian government, which doesn't have real authority, behind the scenes the deep state controls all the key policies, including Pakistan's nuclear weapons program, its militarization, and its covert secret war against India of sponsoring terrorism against our country. So India keeps a close watch on all these developments. Even though India has limited influence with regard to Pakistan's internal politics, India does monitor and watch these developments closely, as it has implications for India-Pakistan relations. So it's in this context that the recent developments become relevant for us, because it shows that the fault lines are deepening again. In few weeks, Pakistan's current army chief, General Bajwa, is all set to retire. Most likely he'll be replaced by a new army chief. So this is a major transition as far as Pakistan's internal structures are concerned. So during the same period, this crisis has erupted in Pakistan's politics as well. Of course, it's not a coincidence. So many experts see that these developments are interlinked and it could have implications for India. So you need to keep a watch as to what will happen in the future. Many experts predict another possible coup, or many experts say that the Pakistani military will further strengthen its control over Pakistan's politics, which would have serious implications for India as well. Next, moving on, we'll take a look at North Korea and examine its nuclear and missile program. This topic has made a lot of news in the last few days, because last week, North Korea fired a barrage of missiles. It fired a number of missiles, more than 20 missiles, around 23 missiles were fired in a single day, aimed towards South Korea and some of them towards Japan. And one of the missiles even landed in the territorial waters of South Korea. Though it was not intended to attack either South Korea or Japan, it was a symbolic posture by North Korea to threaten these countries, to send out a strong aggressive message to South Korea and Japan. So following these missile tests, South Korea and Japan went on high alert. Tensions have increased in the Korean peninsula. Even today, North Korea has again fired few ballistic missiles towards South Korean waters. So this has increased tensions between North and South Korea, and also between North Korea and the United States. So in this context, you need to understand the basics of the Korean conflict over the Korean peninsula. We should also understand the role of the United States and other big powers in this conflict, and talk about the nuclear and missile program of North Korea. So the Korean Peninsula, which you see here in the map, was occupied by imperial fascist Japan during the Second World War. But after Japan was defeated, that is after US dropped nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan was eventually defeated, the Axis powers lost the World War, and since then, a divide broke out over the Korean Peninsula between the North and the South. North Korea aligned with communist ideology during the Cold War, which had started out after 1945, and aligned with the Soviet Union and of course with China, with the People's Republic of China. South Korea, on the other hand, aligned with the Western democracies led by US, Japan, and European countries. This led to a major conflict on the Korean Peninsula between the North and the South, where communist powers like Soviet Union and China would back North Korea, Western powers led by US would back South Korea. This conflict was brought to a temporary halt by signing the Armistice Agreement in 1953, which brought a temporary ceasefire, and it led to the demarcation of a boundary called the DMZ, the Demilitarized Zone, which is essentially the 38th parallel that you see here. So this marks the boundary between North and South Korea. Technically, the two countries are still at war because they have never signed a peace agreement. The Armistice Agreement was just to maintain ceasefire, to end the hostilities and the war. So they haven't signed a peace agreement till date, and technically the two countries are still at war. Over the years, the United States has increased its influence and military presence in South Korea and also in Japan. The US has signed key security military agreements with South Korea and Japan. It has placed troops in both the countries. US has a very strong military presence in both South Korea and Japan. It conducts a lot of military exercises with them as well. So North Korea sees this as a threat. And since many years, North Korea has been pursuing nuclear weapons. It has developed ballistic missiles, of course with the support of China and even with the support of Russia. So North Korea has been largely isolated, cut off from the rest of the world because of its aggressive pursuit of nuclear weapons, because of its violation of international law, including the Non-Proliferation Treaty. So North Korea has been placed under crippling economic sanctions, which has been approved by the UN Security Council. It has even been blacklisted by the FATF, by the Financial Action Task Force. So essentially, North Korea has been largely cut off from other countries, except for its relations with China, Russia, and few other countries. So ever since, North Korea has seen US as well as an imminent threat. North Korea has pursued a very aggressive, hostile policy against US, South Korea, and Japan, and that results in the current state of tensions between these countries. The recent incident has happened because US and South Korea recently conducted a major military exercise in these waters. This is a regular practice between US and South Korea. Similarly, US and Japan also conduct military exercises. US has signed agreements with these countries promising to defend them against any threats, and US has stationed a lot of military troops in both the countries. North Korea has always seen this as a threat and tried to counter this by developing aggressive military policies of its own. It opposes any such military drills and exercises. So North Korea recently saw the exercise between US and South Korea as a provocative rehearsal for a potential invasion of North Korea, and based on this assumption, North Korea has fired multiple missiles aimed at these countries to send out a warning, to send out a threatening message. In the past, attempts have been made to reduce these tensions between North Korea and US. Former President Donald Trump had even opened negotiations with Kim Jong-un. The two leaders met a couple of times. Attempts were made to work out a settlement between US and North Korea. But these peace talks haven't yielded results, and tensions have increased in the last 2-3 years Because North Korea has been accelerating its nuclear and ballistic missile program. See, North Korea is officially referred to as DPRK, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. This country had signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty in 1985. But due to its increasing tensions with US, South Korea and Japan, it quit the Non-Proliferation Treaty in 2003. It's the only country which has signed NPT and later withdrawn from NPT. So, after withdrawing from NPT, North Korea has accelerated its nuclear weapons program and it has developed and tested nuclear weapons. In direct breach of international law, North Korea has not just developed nuclear weapons but also tested nuclear weapons. It recently conducted a nuclear test in 2017. It detonated a thermonuclear device. This test was detected and monitored by countries around the world, including by organizations like CTBT, the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty Organization. They all detected these tremors caused by the detonation of a thermonuclear device. So between 2003 and 2017, North Korea has conducted a few nuclear tests, and with the help of China and even Russia, it has developed a series of ballistic missiles. It has short and medium range missiles which can easily target South Korea and Japan. It has even developed long range ICBMs or intercontinental ballistic missiles which can even strike United States, especially the Hwasong series of long range ICBMs. They can easily target US as well. They have a range of more than 10,000 kilometers. So North Korea uses testing of weapons, both nuclear and ballistic missiles, as a warning, as a threat to South Korea, US and Japan. Just look at this graph. Especially after 2010 under Kim Jong-un, the number of tests of ballistic missiles have gone up. Especially this year, there has been a sudden jump in the missile tests conducted by North Korea. This has always been a North Korean tactic, a strategy to put pressure on US and South Korea and to increase tensions in the region. Is that clear? So this has implications not just for East Asia, it has implications for rest of the world as well. India did have a trading relationship with North Korea, a limited trading relationship, but we have strongly opposed North Korea's nuclear program. Today we barely have relations with North Korea. But the nuclear tensions, the military tensions here does affect Indian interests, because increasingly India is playing a major role in the Indo-Pacific, in the East Asia region as well, through its Act East policy. India is a very close friend of Japan and South Korea. We have very close military, defense and strategic relations with Japan and South Korea. Of course, there is the China angle as well. China would encourage North Korea as a proxy to destabilize the region in order to counter American influence. So this has implications for India also. Alright, so that's the reason why this topic is very relevant, very important for the exams. Now coming to the last topic, we shall take a look at Ethiopia and the Tigray conflict, which has deeply affected the country in the last 2 years. The topic is in news because last week, a landmark agreement, a peace agreement has been signed between the Ethiopian government and the rebel group called TPLF, the Tigray People's Liberation Front. And this peace agreement was signed in South Africa following negotiations between the two parties, which was mediated by the African Union. This peace agreement could potentially bring this 2-year conflict to an end and bring some stability to this region. So first, let's understand the geography of this region, of Ethiopia and Tigray region, as it can be very relevant for your prelims. Then we shall evaluate this conflict. We'll talk about India's interests as well with regard to this issue. See, this is where Ethiopia is located. It's located in the Horn of Africa region. It's a landlocked country in the Horn of Africa. It is surrounded by Djibouti here. This is Eritrea, Sudan, South Sudan, Kenya, and Somalia. So Ethiopia is located in a very volatile region because in Somalia you have a civil war going on. You have radical terror outfits like Al-Shabaab, which are in control. There is civil war going on for many years in Sudan and South Sudan. There is the risk of volatility and terrorism in Kenya as well. Eritrea also has seen a lot of destabilization, especially here where it shares borders with the Tigray region of Ethiopia. This is where the Tigray region is located. Towards the northern parts of Ethiopia, where Ethiopia shares borders with Eritrea and Sudan. This is where the Tigray region is located, and it's home to the Tigray people. The Tigray community belongs to a native ethno-tribal community. So the Tigray region that extends to the Amhara region here represents a distinct ethnic region within Ethiopia. So in the Tigray region, the Tigray community, the ethno-tribal group, has always been represented politically by this outfit called TPLF, the Tigray People's Liberation Front. This is not just a political outfit, but it has also been a militant rebel outfit as well. The Tigray community under the TPLF has always seen themselves as a distinct community, and they have sought liberation and independence as well in this region. The Tigray community, they even have standing conflicts and disputes with Eritrea, the northern neighbor of Ethiopia. So this conflict has dragged from the last 2 years. The conflict has spread to the neighboring Amhara and Afar regions as well. Thousands of people have been killed, millions of people have been displaced, and it has led to a major humanitarian crisis in the Horn of Africa region. The Horn of Africa is already hit by a drought and a very serious famine. There is very serious shortage of food. It is killing a number of people all across Horn of Africa. Along with this, these conflicts, the presence of terrorism, civil war conditions in this entire region has led to a major humanitarian crisis all across Horn of Africa. So we need to understand what triggered this conflict. Generally, Ethiopia has been a very stable country. But 2 years back, in 2018, Ethiopia got a new prime minister known as Abiy Ahmed. Abiy Ahmed is a Nobel Peace Laureate. He was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2019 because he championed a peace deal with Eritrea. Ethiopia and Eritrea, they had a long-standing conflict between them because of an unresolved border in and around the Tigray region itself. So Abiy Ahmed negotiated a peace agreement with Eritrea, settled the conflict, and provided for peace and stability in the region. Along with that, he introduced a lot of governance reforms, introduced democratic reforms, gave more powers to the central government of Ethiopia, and also reached out to the political opposition and was transforming Ethiopia. He was seen as a very progressive leader in Africa. So in recognition of his efforts, he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize as well. But these efforts of Abiy Ahmed were resisted by the Tigray people because TPLF has a long-standing rivalry with Eritrea. They didn't want the conflict to end. The TPLF, which acts as the representative of the Tigray community, rejected the peace deal with Eritrea and declared war against the Ethiopian government itself. Because at the national level, the Tigray leaders of TPLF had been removed by Abiy Ahmed. He was seen as an autocratic leader who was centralizing power, concentrating more power in the hands of the central government, which was weakening TPLF, and they saw this as a threat to their local interests of the Tigray community. So TPLF declared war against Ethiopia, and thus began a major conflict, an internal conflict. In this conflict, Eritrea has targeted TPLF because of their age-old rivalry. Eritrean forces have been accused of committing large-scale human rights violations here. TPLF apparently gets support from Sudan because Sudan also has a border dispute with Ethiopian government. Apparently, Sudan backs TPLF, whereas Eritrea targets TPLF, and together Ethiopia and Eritrea have launched major military strikes against the TPLF. In the last 2 years, they have conducted major assaults in these regions. The Ethiopian government, along with Eritrea from the north, together they have targeted the Tigray community, and large-scale killings have happened. They have even conducted airstrikes. Large-scale military operations have been conducted in the region where thousands of people have been killed and displaced. Now the concern is that this could lead to the wider destabilization of Horn of Africa and East Africa. All the countries here, they're already very volatile and destabilized, like Somalia, Sudan, Kenya, East Africa, right? They already face a number of risks. They are affected by civil war, radicalism, terrorism, etc. Plus they are affected by famine, drought conditions, lack of food security, and other developmental problems. So we are staring at a very serious humanitarian crisis in the region. That is why the Tigray conflict has gained global attention. The UN especially, along with African Union, which is a major regional organization of Africa, have been pushing for a settlement to this conflict. So finally, through negotiations, last week in South Africa, African Union has mediated a peace agreement between the Ethiopian government and the TPLF. Apparently, TPLF has agreed to end the conflict, to surrender, and in return, Ethiopia is likely to suspend the military operations. However, there is no clarity whether Eritrea will stop the military operations. But this is being seen as a breakthrough which could end the violence and bring some stability to this badly affected region. Now, India does watch these developments because the conflict, the Tigray conflict, had destabilized Ethiopia. Ethiopia is an important partner for India in Africa. India has been paying a lot of attention to Africa in the last 15-20 years, ever since we carried out the India-Africa Forum Summit in 2009. India has really stepped up its African diplomacy, and we have been paying more attention to Southern Africa, East Africa, West Africa, and even North Africa. African Union has become a key partner for India, and large African countries like South Africa, Ethiopia, Nigeria, Egypt, these are the major partners for India. In Ethiopia as well, India has a very good influence. We have offered a lot of concessional loans in the form of line of credit. Concessional loans worth around $1 billion has been provided by India, which Ethiopia has invested in key infrastructure projects. India has made a lot of investments to strengthen governance as well in Ethiopia. We have offered tele-education, telemedicine services through the ambitious Pan-Africa e-Network project, which is a soft power initiative by India to provide remote education, remote healthcare services through Indian institutions. Indian companies also have made a lot of investments. There are more than 500 Indian companies operating in Ethiopia across the sectors of agriculture, information technology, banking, telecommunication. In all these key sectors, Indian companies are involved in Ethiopia with big investments. There are a lot of Indians residing in Ethiopia and working in Ethiopia as well. The bilateral trade is also quite strong compared to other African countries. So India does have decently close relations with Ethiopia, and the normalization of this conflict, the end of this conflict, would be a boost for India-Ethiopia relations. So that is why this topic can be relevant for prelims and even for mains. So this brings our discussion to an end. With this, we complete episode 93 of IR this week. We have covered 5 important topics. I hope it was a fruitful session. Do let us know how the session went by liking the video, share your comments below, share the video with other aspirants, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching. Good night.